Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Linsly Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to It's Time. We're so happy to see you guys. Today, we thought we would do a little review. Our too long didn't read, too long didn't listen. Let's hit the high points of some of our big hitter podcasts that have just dropped in the last few months.
Yes. I mean, I can't even believe, Jen, that it's like end of February, right? So, we talked about this being a quarterly review. It almost is the first quarter of 2025. How did that happen? And boy, it's been a huge one. And a lot of the fire hose that we talked about has indeed been turned on, and a lot's been out there. So I'm so thankful that we can take this moment to pause and just say, this is our simple 7, like the simple 7 TLDR. What do you want to take away for 2025 as we continue to march ahead?
Yeah. And so I think it's probably even more important to review some of this, given the floodgates are opening, information is flowing at rates never before, which is great in some circles and resources and is really challenging to navigate in others. And so as just kind of my call to action on information, and I know we talked about this, we went deep on this, but is peel it back a layer. Whether you're getting your information from your news feed, whether you're getting your information from social media, like all of these things can have great information, and they can all have information that is conflicting, and they can all have information that maybe is not of the highest quality. And so to deal with that, maybe just go a layer deeper. Like if you see something, you're like, wow, that seems really interesting. Go a layer deeper and just make sure that it's backed by the credibility that you want it to be backed by.
So should we dive in our simple 7 here? Yeah. So the first one, because I think we've had some amazing experts who are so deep in this category that it can almost be like, wow, where to start? But the simplification of it, when we talk about hormones, hormone therapy, menopause, what were kind of some of the key takeaways we heard in that number one thing about navigating life, peri and postmenopause, hormone takeaways?
Yes. So I would say number one is you can start taking hormones early.
Yep.
And you can stay on them earlier than you thought. And you can stay on them almost indefinitely.
Yeah.
If
that was
a
huge new news for me, was that you could stay on them your whole life. Because I always had heard this idea that you have to start at a certain time and then get off of them after 10 years. And we've had, Dr. Ando and some of our other experts are coming on that will be releasing in a few weeks. We've heard this multiple times now. You can stay on hormone therapy as long as you're getting value out of it. And probably leads us to number 2 is probably getting more value than you think.
Yeah. And so I think the science is really evolving. And this is a place, back to Linsly, all of your prototyping expertise is science changes. And so the science here is being advanced. Thankfully, there has been funding for this up until recently to really start looking at a lot of the hormone data. And for our cardiovascular health, for our bone health, and probably for our cognition, staying on hormones long term, it's really important.
Yeah. So I loved learning that. We learned that from not only kind of our cardiovascular expert with Dr. Jane, obviously Dr. Ando as well, but the idea that your cognitive health, number one killer, you are the expert on this, and you remind us that, hey, it's heart health. That's your number one, kind of, can you avoid this hammer? But then the secondary part is you can continue to take hormones, and you should from an intervention perspective, even if you're 70 years old. The idea that some of our doctor experts put their mothers on hormones in order to be heart protective, cognition protective, it's huge credibility lever to get the hormone thing as part of your protocol as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think to back that up, if hormones are not for you for whatever reasons, understanding your changes, I think going back to what Dr. Morgan was saying, going back to what Dr. Ando was saying, that understand that your cardiovascular disease profile changes really rapidly at this time. So maybe it's a time to take your blood pressure a little more often. Make sure somebody's checking your cholesterol at least once a year, maybe even more than that. Really kind of double down on making sure and advocating for yourself through that time period if you can't benefit from the protective effects of hormones. Same thing with the cognition, being aware that those things are changing really rapidly, and then being able to monitor those in real time. And so, because there are other tools in the toolkit, there's not, hormones is great because it's kind of a really important tool that can cover a lot of areas instead of having to reach for a lot of different things. But if you need to reach for a lot of different things, they're there. You just really need to be able to advocate for yourself.
Yeah. Well, so, that kind of reminds us of the number 2 thing in the Simple 7 was just the heart health. So when you talk about Dr. Jane Morgan, she talked about get an EKG, which is not something that I, normally would ask for in every sort of checkup. And she said, do that. And then also get your blood pressure checked regularly. And so the kind of check-in points for heart health were a little bit of new news for me and thinking about the block and tackle for the year.
Yeah. And I'm going to take that one step farther. When you get your EKG, take a picture of it on your phone. If you've been checking your blood pressure regularly and writing it down somewhere, either keep that note on your phone someplace, because what happens is, we get sick or we get in an accident and we end up in an emergency room somewhere and they don't have a baseline and you're nervous and your blood pressure is 200 over 100. Well, is it always that high, or is this just a problem? And so just like you would take a picture of your medication list to have with you, take a picture of these things. And so if somebody needs to find them, they're really easy to access.
Yes. And then the other thing about the heart health that I think you raised for us is an event presents differently in women, right? So just reminding our cohort here that just because it's not this thing about your left arm being paralyzed, it doesn't mean you're not having a heart event. There are different ways that you might be feeling something is off. It could be an anxiety intensity. It could be a loss of breath. It could be, I feel woozy. And that could be the same thing as the left arm went numb that we've heard about for a heart event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we joked about this with Dr. Morgan, this idea of atypical chest pain, but that's really what it's still called in the medical field. And it's exactly what you described. It's that label is given to anyone that presents with chest pain that doesn't meet the standard textbook criteria, which we know is pretty much developed around how men present with a heart attack. And
Yes.
so, and so again, to go back to be your own advocate, to say, I don't feel well. And if the healthcare providers are dismissive and you don't think they're getting enough attention, I loved Jane's piece of advice, just going, hey, can we just do a quick EKG before I head out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can really, that's not 100% foolproof, but it can definitely start to show early signs of a heart attack, definitely picks up on late signs of a heart attack. But I think that that's a pretty simple test that people can ask for if they think that they're not being taken seriously.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the EKG, that reminds me of our third sort of Simple 7, which is using wearables data to help and not to stress. And don't be a slave to the wearables data, but if you see things in it that's kind of weird or different, pay attention to it and ask your doctor. And so the reason this is kind of tied to the EKG is we had this anecdote in our community where a friend was seeing on their wearable that they had, either no data for HRV and sleep tracking on their, I think it was on their Whoop, or they had kind of super irregular data. And they just sort of dismissed it and said, yeah, I'm not a candidate for the wearable. But then they went in and had an EKG, and it turned out they were having a massive heart event. And the doctor's feedback was, actually, your wearable was interesting data because it was telling you something was off in your system. So if you're using a wearable, it doesn't mean you have to check it every day, or it doesn't mean if it says you got a bad night's sleep that you shouldn't go give your presentation. But if you see something really out of the bounds of normality in it, talk to your doctor. Use it as a tool.
Absolutely. And I think, that, and before we leave wearables, I think that also goes back to that, if you are a person that has more pigment in your skin, or maybe and we know wearables are not as active or as accurate, in communities with people who have more pigment. Learn about that too. I think that's important to say, how does that correlate with what you're seeing at the doctor? So you can still learn to use this technology and just adapt it for how your body, how it is measuring your individual body.
Yeah. I thought Dr. Morgan had a great tip on that, which was to make sure your wearable is kind of twisted if you're wearing it on your finger and close tucked in. It was helpful if you had a lot of pigment in your skin, but there's a lot of different tactical ways you can interpret how to get the most out of that wearable when you actively look for that information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfect.
So,
all right.
Number four. Yeah, number four. And I think this is a great one that you flagged for us because, as a doctor, you've got this great balance between things that are additive and things that are maybe not only not helpful, but could be potentially, from your pocketbook destructive, but also potentially problem for you internally. And that's in the category of supplements.
Yeah. So I think supplements are amazing tools, right? And we talk about them all the time. We're trying different ones all the time, et cetera. But I think we have to remember what even the definition of the word supplement is, which is in addition to, right? So
the supplement,
we're going to get back to the basics. This is a supplement. And while it's great and there's a lot of information, I think there's a lot of people who, and my household's one of them. I mean, new supplements are showing up every day at this house.
Yes.
But you have to be careful what you're putting in your body, right? Because things interact with each other in the ways that we don't know. The supplement industry, as we've talked about, is highly unregulated. And that doesn't mean there aren't awesome players, and we try to point those out too, who are really doing great work and taking the steps and spending the money to make sure that their products are certified and pure and all of the things that we would want in something that we're putting in our bodies.
Yeah.
That being said, there's a lot of players out there that are not doing that. And so if you try influencer A's protocol and it has 6 supplements and you want to combine that with the influencer B's protocol and influencer C protocol, and all of a sudden you're taking 25 things, just be careful because, those all still have to be digested through our GI tract, metabolized through our livers. And we're starting to see some of these combinations or super physiologically dosing some of these supplements is causing some liver damage and is causing some other end organ damage. And so just because it's a supplement doesn't equate with it being safe for everyone in every dose and every circumstance. And so just, the pharmaceutical industry gets a lot of bad press and some of it very rightfully so. But the fact that there are some regulations around how you use some of those medications, it is for your own safety. And so just be careful that, there's a very gray area between a pharmacological agent and a supplement. And there is a very large difference in regulatory oversight.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we had Shannon from Gnarly on recently. And in that conversation, I think you and she outlined a number of the certification third-party references that people can turn to because there is a role for supplements to play in our overall health portfolio. No question. And so 100%. Just knowing what are those certification agencies, and when you realize that for a supplement provider to work with one of those agencies, they have to invest dollars and time to get that certification. It helps mitigate some of the risk of, is this what I'm actually putting in my body? Does that, the label, are they the same? So I think that's and what's, how do these all interact? So I think there are some great efficient shortcuts from that episode and from some in the prior ones on Block and Tackle on how to know which supplements are worth your time and worth your body.
Yeah. And I think, you are such a trailblazer in doing this, and you are so educated and committed to using supplements in combination with your lab work, right? And so I think that is a critical piece that sometimes is disconnected for people is what do you need to be supplementing? And so, because I think when we're starting to see some liver damage and what the science behind that is saying is that the supplement itself is probably okay. It's probably the dose, or there's a significant dose contributing to that. So using supplements to super boost up something that naturally in your body is supposed to be here. And I'm using my hands to talk, as my kids would say, but is naturally supposed to be at a certain level in your body. And you're trying to push it to these really high levels. Well, it's probably naturally supposed to be at a certain level in your body for a reason. And so it's not always more is not always better. Let's just put it that way. And so, using your lab work, a lot of us are vitamin D deficient, and vitamin D is a great supplement. And if you know you're vitamin D deficient, taking vitamin D is really helpful. If you're not vitamin D deficient, super physiologic doses may not be beneficial. It may just be at the minimum a waste of money. And at the maximum, when you get to levels high enough, it can be harmful.
Yeah. So because your liver has to process it. So, so supplements kind of tease up our fifth simple 7, which is, if you're not going to get it through supplements, you want to start getting it through nutrition, right? So you want to get it through your whole foods. And so we've heard, a gazillion different diets. We've talked about that in prior episodes. It's not like one diet is the right diet, but the overarching, pillar would be get your nutrition through whole foods. Get whole foods.
Absolutely.
Versus takeout foods, the fast foods, the processed foods, just try to get as much of your daily intake through the whole foods.
Yeah. And I think you do such a great job with this in the fact that, to get the protein we need, we add a protein supplement. But even just listening to, you and Shannon talk, or you and Jay talk when we've had Jay on, it is whole foods first. And how do I plan my day with whole foods? And then sprinkle in my supplementation to know where to add those things. And so, starting with a whole food plan, and then supplements, are kind of the additions on top to fill the holes in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think also, when we talk about Jay and the conversation that you had with Jay when we had her on our episode, was, I think, also eye-opening around do what's right for your body, right? If it's not working for your body, you don't have to follow it. So we hear all of this about get more protein. And you and I both would say, yep, everybody should get more protein, probably more protein than they've ever had in their life, but maybe not as much protein as out there that's being pushed on people, right? Like maybe 120 grams of protein is actually too much for you. It hurts your stomach. It's too much to eat, etc. So it's like you're trying to lean into protein. That's the 80-20, but not at the expense of being comfortable and being able to manage your food intake.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. All right. What's next?
Well, I think this is one.
Linsly's our list. Yes.
This is our deep dive. This is your deep dive expertise. And it's one that I'm always, I think of you all the time, but I often think of you the last part of the day because it's sleep. How do I do it? Dr. Jen tells me for sleep.
Gosh, and I will say I have had one of the worst weeks of sleep of my life this week, between having a child that is numerous time zones away and not very good at calculating, to just, for some reason, not sleeping well. Okay, guys, if there's one thing, sleep is our foundation. And so if we are not sleeping, doing all of the rest of these things, one, it gets exponentially harder. 2, they're less impactful because of sleep is so important to keeping our general level of health and wellness, that if we're not sleeping and yet we're doing all the right exercises and feeding things, our bodies have to spend so much time repairing and using that energy to repair because we haven't slept well. So I think number 1 is just make it a priority. And there's a few things we can do. Our good friend, David Stewart, this is my favorite line, and I steal it from him all the time. He calls it crashing the plane. And that's what adults try to do. We try to go from 30,000 feet, 100 miles an hour, hundreds of miles an hour to sleep. And that just doesn't work. So add some relaxation in at the end of the day. Your favorite one, Lindsay, I know, is put your phone away. Try to get off your phone half hour, an hour before you go to bed, and try not to pick it up for 30 minutes after you wake up.
Yes. Or, if that's not feasible for you, try to be mindful what you're doing on it. You don't need to be doing your email and your Slack. Maybe you are just texting somebody you love, and that's positive energy that you're doing across that wire. So yeah. And I think the other things that, because you did a great laundry list for us as I am the list and the taskmaster around sleep hygiene. So things like just wear your mask, Try a white noise machine. So many things you have in our sleep episode are practical, free, tangible to how to help sleep be net positive for you. And the underlying thing is it shouldn't be a stressor. Okay, so if you got 6 hours, that's okay. You got 6 hours. You don't have to be stressed out about it the minute you open your eyes the next day. You're just trying to slowly add deep restorative sleep in ways that are feasible for you and the lifestyle you're prioritizing.
Yeah. And I want to just double down on that point because I think it is so important to use your biometric data and your sleep feedback as it's helpful for you. And our friend Wendy Troxel, who we are going to have on our podcast, she is just one of the most amazing sleep experts I've ever encountered. And she just wrote a great article basically saying when to take it off, and when to, when your biometrics are not serving you, and how to have a healthy relationship with your data. And I thought it was great. And because she's a sleep expert, hers was more about sleep data. And then even I'm laughing because yesterday morning I was working out and I was talking to a friend and she's like, oh, I love my sleep. My sleep data. It's really helped my anxiety. And I just started laughing. And she's like, you don't have yours on. I'm like, no, I only wear mine for short change when I'm doing something actively to change because it gives me anxiety. And so it's like two people in the same room, totally different experience.
And it's true, right? I mean, this data should serve you, not chain you, right? You are not the slave to your data. Your data is in service of you making decisions are helping you. So, so our last one, because this is our favorite one, because we get to walk and live it right now, is the number one thing all the research, all the science, all the evidence says is have time with the community that feeds you. Be with the people you love in whatever way that kind of time is enjoyable. Is it hiking? Is it skiing? Is it sitting around the fire reading a book? Is it whatever? It's being with people who feed your heart and soul is the number one lever for happiness and for longevity. So that is the best of the secret seven, simple seven, is being with people you love and allocating time to building that community and nurturing it.
Yep. And it is not a bonus. It's a have to. I think, we don't say very many have tos. I think that is one that we have to, if we don't put it in the have to, it's easy to cross off the list because we feel like it is indulgent sometimes.
Or it's a luxury.
To say,
it's not a luxury. It's not a luxury.
Yeah, exactly.
Fundamental. Yeah.
It's not a luxury. Yeah. It's fundamental. And so if you have to put it in the have to bucket for it to become a habit and for you to embrace it, then put it in the have to bucket because it's that important.
Yes. And if you need to have data and track it, then put it on your calendar and track it every week and every day. You did it. Speaking of the data out, put it there. So that is our TLDR.
Yes.
Simple
and
stuff.
Thank you for listening. I know some of our episodes, we try to keep them pretty light and interactive and digestible, but I know sometimes we get some feedback that we've gone a little overboard. So we wanted to just break it down, hit the highlights, and just review a little bit because it's always great to have a good reminder for ourselves as well of where we are, where we're going, what we've talked about.
Yes. And keep us posted if there are more things that you're curious about learning how to put them to work so that you feel better now and in the long haul. That's why we're here.
Have a great afternoon, everybody. Let's talk soon.